When we're on a date, the last thing we want to come across as is needy. As Mark Manson says, neediness is unattractiveness. However, what most people don't realize is that the same applies to med school admissions. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about how you can avoid making perhaps the single largest mistake a lot of med school applicants make, myself included, up until a certain point in the application process. If you're new here, my name is Ujjwal, and I'm a recently graduated chemistry student from the DC area. I make videos on being pre-med, productivity, and lifestyle. So if any of those things sound interesting or appealing to you, please consider subscribing. Let's get on with today's video. Med schools don't want to accept applicants for whom going to med school, getting into med school is their ultimate destination. In other words, medical schools don't want people who want to go to med school. Rather, they want applicants who need to go to med school. Now, I know that may sound kind of counterintuitive and it may not make much sense, but the fact is, med schools want applicants and students who have a larger goal. They have a larger picture in mind, and for these students, going to medical school is only part of the journey towards realizing and actualizing their ultimate goals. Now, what that ultimate goal is going to be is really up to you and depends on what really resonates with you. So for example, if you're someone who really likes research and you're really into clinical research and working in the wet lab, taking things that you get from the lab and taking it to the bedside, then that's going to be your focus. Another type of focus could be someone who's really into helping underserved populations. These are just two examples of a myriad of things that could really be your interest and your desire for pursuing medicine. But the overall point here is medical schools want to see someone who has a larger goal and picture in mind. Now, one place you see this really clearly is in the questions in the secondary applications, along the lines of what are your plans for the future? What's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Or maybe even what kind of patient population do you want to work with? I remember for one of the medical schools that I applied to and I was doing their secondary, they asked me what kind of environment and what kind of location I saw myself practicing in the future. Now, I think the main problem here with these questions is that, well, first of all, not only are you going to see these in your secondaries, they're going to come up in the interviews as well, and I think that's a line of questioning that a lot of students don't prepare for, so more on that in another video. But I think the largest issue is, in this process, we are so busy with trying to get into medical school that we don't really give it a second thought as to what our life is going to hold for us after medical school. So really, that part of our life, is kind of left up in the air. And we kind of base everything off of this application cycle and, where we go to med school. So I think what we need to do is we need to really change our perspective when it comes to approaching the application cycle. We do really need to think about what our needs, what our wants are. Because it's really important to have our future plan kind of decided and figured out regardless of medical school. Remember, when I said medical schools want someone who has a larger picture in mind, the reason why I said that is because your larger picture is going to stand true regardless of what the next 4 years are going to hold for you, regardless of the outcome of this application cycle, regardless of which medical school you go to, because that's what your larger goal is. That's why for students for whom getting into medical school is part of their goals, it's really difficult to come up with an effective answer for these types of questions because they don't see a future beyond getting into medical school, and that kind of clouds their view and judgment. So my overall point here is you have to really think about what your future plans are, why you're really doing this, and what the overall picture and the overall goal is, for the reason being that you're pursuing medical school right now. All right, so how can you kind of convey this stuff effectively and clearly, right? So we know that it's difficult to kind of do this because, we're focused on getting into med school. So how can we help make the process easier? Well, I have two pieces of advice, essentially. So the first piece of advice is you need to be specific. So when you hit those questions talking about your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, where you want to practice, you have to be specific. Unfortunately, I believe a lot of medical school applicants like to be generic and vague because one, they don't give it a second thought, so it's easier to kind of defer to the more general of the answers. And second, they really just don't know. Like they genuinely think, they genuinely are going to have plans that are going to change, and they kind of find it, outlandish to have that kind of answer already prepared. But the reason why those questions exist on the secondaries and interviews are to kind of get at what that larger goal and picture is. Although your plans are going to change later on, and you can most definitely mention that, I mean, 60% of people who go to med school change their mind about their specialty itself. So med schools definitely understand that your plans are going to change, but they still want to see someone who has given some thought to what lies beyond med school. If you're someone who's applying to medical school, it means you have some plans, you have some goals, you have something in mind that you want to do, at least up until the next 4 years. So they essentially want to see that you've also given thought to the years after that. All right, so you need to be very specific. Now, what do I mean by being specific? If they ask you what your 10-year plans are, and let's say you're really into research, you can be very specific about that. You can talk about how clinical research is going to be a large part of your practice. You see yourself pursuing research, let's say you're really into cardiology research. You can talk about how I'm going to be pursuing some type of cardiology research, or maybe, if you have really specific interests, you can talk about it. I know a lot of people may think that this sounds premature to be able to even fathom doing clinical research as a physician, but these questions exist for a reason, as I've said before. They do want to see that you've given this some thought, and whether you're going to get into med school or not, that's besides the point. The fact is, you have larger goals, you know what you want to do, and you need to talk about it right here with the expectation that yes, I am going to be going to medical school this upcoming cycle, this upcoming year, and I'm going to pursue this plan as it's laid out. It's just a tentative schedule, and it's really just meant to give the medical schools an idea of what their return on investment is going to be. Because think about it, when medical schools are interviewing other applicants, you are also interviewing the school. They want people who are going to be a good return on their investment in their focus and in their niche. And that takes me to the second point. In addition to being specific in your answers, you also need to tailor your answers and essentially apply to medical schools and really focus on medical schools which resonate with you. There's going to be a lot of different types of medical schools out there, and if you're interested in finding out how you should be crafting your med school list, then check out my other video that I'll link below, where I talk about the criteria that you should keep in mind as you formulate your medical school list. Essentially, each medical school has its own focus. There's going to be research-oriented schools. There's going to be service-oriented schools. There's going to be public health-oriented schools. It's really important that you realize that these focuses exist and make sure that you tailor your applications accordingly and apply to schools which fit your mission. Not only do the medical schools have their own mission statement, but you also have your own mission statement as well. As silly as that may sound, you have your own focus, you have your own goals. And as much as you're trying to get into medical schools also need to fill up their seats with applicants who are going to be a good return on their investment. So here's an example. Let's say, let's go back to the previous example. Clinical research, you really want to do some cardiology research, then apply to schools, that have a good research focus, that have clinical research activities, they have PIs that are very productive, and talk about that. And be even more specific to the point where you can talk about some PIs if you know them, just do some research on the school's website, and talk about how you're really interested in potentially working with them as mentors and doing research in cardiology, and whatever, and how you're going to bring skills that you've used in your undergrad years and developed in your undergrad years to the table to help advance the field. It will not sound premature. It's going to sound mature, actually, because you've given it that much thought and you're being very practical, and you're telling the schools what kind of return on investment they can expect out of you. You're telling them what kind of physician you plan on becoming, and that's really what medical schools are looking for. A research-focused school wants an applicant that will go out into the world and be very productive in terms of research. They will love that. Medical schools essentially put their sticker on you as a student when you go there. And when you go out into the world and you do these amazing things, whether that be research, service, public health related stuff, it's a big deal for the medical schools that they were able to produce someone who is a very productive member of society and a very productive member of medicine, in fact. So that's really the two things that I recommend you guys keep in mind. I know that in the medical school application process, as I've said before, it's really difficult to kind of keep your eye on the larger picture. And it's very easy to kind of fall into this narrow-minded trap of, I just need to focus on getting into med school. Yes, you do need to focus on getting into med school. Like, you got to brush up on your interview skills, your writing skills, portraying yourself effectively. But at the same time, you need to think about what your larger goals are, what you want out of medical school, and be very specific when you convey that information in your secondary applications and also in your interviews as you're sitting in front of your interviewers. All right, guys. So That is it for this video. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, as always, leave a comment down below, or you can send me a DM. I do respond to all Instagram DMs. Take care, and I will see you in that next one.